you wake up in the morning and you're like, oh my God, already stressed out, or you go to the gym in a fasted state, you're adding stress to the. What is the relationship between cortisol and metabolic health and glucose? If you have sugar circulating in your body, okay, that's not too bad, depending on the type of sugar.
Like, hey, we got visual.
There you go. We made it. Hold on. I made it. Let me increase the volume over here. How are you?
Good. How are you?
You know, loving it. Can you hear me okay?
I can. I love the green in your background.
I
so
know.
Pretty.
Now, that's my office. I put a little corn over here. That's it.
Awesome. Well, Maria, it's your first time on. So why don't we start with you just telling everybody who you are and what you like to do, who you like to help, just so people have a background on your specialization.
Well, first of all, it's awesome to be here with you. And yes, my first Instagram live. Kudos to you to get me on going here. That's great. First of all, folks, you're going to have a great time here with us tonight or today. And yes, my name is Maria Horstmann. I'm a functional diagnostic nutritional practitioner, and I also have an MBA background of 20 plus years in corporate. And today, you know, for the past 10 years, I've been helping high achieving professionals to actually perform at their peak. And what it means is for them to let go of poor energy, fatigue, you know, low productivity focus, to reach levels that they didn't even think that they could have, and shed some pounds too. So it's all about metabolic health for me. And then we include several other things that get to metabolic health, which actually Courtney and I are gonna discuss here today. So yeah, I'm excited. I'm here to help professionals just like me, you know, to thrive.
Exactly, Maria. And it's funny because you and I both kind of have a bit of that spitfire, which is why I think this is going to be such a dynamic conversation. We both have the same FDN training, which is awesome.
Yeah.
And I think we really do cater to a very similar type of person. I too work with a lot of type A, high achieving, goal oriented people, just like you. I don't have an MBA, but I do have a very high achieving background and story. So I think we're going to kind of talk about just bits of our own health journey and what we discovered in our efforts to perform highly that led to health breakdown, and then how that got us into doing the work we do, and then how, as we're trained as functional diagnostic nutrition practitioners, we can use those tools to help people like us overcome these health obstacles, right?
Yes, yes. And I love it. I mean, really, yeah. The trajectory of adding data to health is extremely important, right? Because, and you probably went through maybe before FDN, is the point that, you know, you help people are suffering from multiple, you know, side effects of poor health for a while, or coming from diet, stress, whatever. And then you go into the trial and error response. And okay, I tried this, I tried that. Reality is that our folks here, they've tried a lot of stuff.
Absolutely.
They want to resolve the problem.
Yeah.
And what I came across is years ago, I says, you know what, this thing about just coaching without scientific data from functional lab testing, it's kind of, you know, leaves things behind a little bit. So we can speed up the process, you know, of this by giving results faster to individuals. As long, obviously, they're on the road over here to get answers and to put the work behind to implement our recommendations, which are always based on, you know, natural therapies, diet, exercise, sleep, stress reduction, and supplementation that is target based on what we see. So I'm saying this on behalf of Courtney and I, because we do the same kind of, you know, path, correct, Courtney?
Exactly. Yeah, no, I agree wholeheartedly. And sometimes this question comes up even on, like, you know, intro calls with clients where they'll be like, well, what test can you run? And I'm like, well, theoretically, I don't know that there is a test we can't run. Now, there are some tests that are better than others, and you and I are going to talk about two very specifically today. But I want to just put that out there because I feel like with our training, we really bridge the gap between nutrition and functional medicine. And a lot of what we can do with that root cause testing at our fingertips, and the nutritional and sugar handling and all of foundational kind of like physiological support we can offer our clients, it's a powerful combination of tools. And so again, just to clarify, this is sort of how we as FDN practitioners I feel are so unique and
Yeah.
have such a high level of knowledge and training in the functional space, right? Yeah.
Yes. And I love it. I
Yeah.
love it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so let's talk about stress, Maria, because I know when you and I were first connecting, we were trying to figure out what's a common bridge we could make between our two ideal client populations that we work with. The people struggling with metabolic health, might even say like hormone imbalance in that camp, right? Maybe lack of energy, that type of thing. And then the camp that I tend to focus on, which is like gut health issues of all types, IBS, IBD, right? And we both kind of right out of the gate, we're like, yeah, stress is a very common issue and theme that leads to breakdown in both camps of people. So I would love for you to talk about signs that a person is actually working too hard, whether that's in their job, that's at the gym, right? And like maybe you can even talk a little bit from your own experience and how that can lead to health breakdown.
Yeah. First, I think that I don't know anybody who is not stressed out,
Yeah,
right?
totally.
And there is different types of stressors. There is physical, mental, emotional, and there is even perceived distress.
Very true.
Sometimes we even perceive certain levels of stress that may or may not exist. We might even impose that upon us, and that goes beyond therapy here. We're not doing therapy here today. Right? But
Just to be clear about our scope of work, right, Maria?
yeah, we're not therapists
No.
for sure. But sometimes actually people think that we're life coaches. We're not certified in life coaching, but we are coaches and
Yes,
practitioners.
we can
That's for sure.
Yeah.
But yes, the stress can be really a killer. And oftentimes, I think society has normalized stress in a way that everybody's doing so much that if I'm not doing much, who are you? Who are you for not being to that level? Well, there is actually a negative side effect in the body. So from a metabolic perspective, if you think about what is metabolic perspective, well, we're talking about your metabolism, your energy. And, how we are here today is our energy. So how you show up in life. And then again, performance is in personal, in everything related to work, whatever you do, or even if you're retired, are you doing the things that you love, right? So how does this stress impact our metabolic health? Well, it's really is going to go down to how our nervous system is actually conversing with our body. It starts from the brain, what was called, HPA axis, hypothalamus, pituitary, adrenal glands. So that's a communication from the brain over here to adrenal glands that produce cortisol, which is our stress hormone. And by the way, let me just say this, the word cortisol can have such a negative connotation, but you know what, folks? Without it, we're not here, right? Stress can be viewed from a positive, is what gives us the intention to be here, right? Probably have a little butterfly before the call, or you have an important meeting you got to go to, you got to go at it. You wake up in the morning, you're like, why eyes pop up, right? Or for the workout, you feel like, oh, I'm all pumped up. Or even during the workout or after, you feel pumped up. This is energy. That's kind of cortisol, right? Now, there is the chronic part of cortisol. So the body is built for us to, okay, we're going to kick this guy out to give you what you need, the focus and yada, yada. And then the body's going to say, okay, we're going to calm down after that. So we can go up and down with that. So that's we manage that. That's a healthy levels of cortisol. But when it becomes chronic, that you're always on the go, 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 well, that starts impacting our health, right? And now, specifically when it comes to blood sugar, people think, I don't have blood sugar issues. This is, how do you know that? Well, I mean, I don't know. Nobody told me that I am diabetic. Well, there is a lot of things that happen before to that point, and that's part of what we do as practitioners. First is to make people aware. Second is to help them understand that high levels of glucose, can impact your health in the long term, right? Why? And what is the relationship between cortisol and metabolic health and glucose? Well, the stress, is going to need glucose. It's sugar, right? That is like, so if you have sugar circulating in your body, okay, that's not too bad, depending on the type of sugar. But if you wake up in the morning and you're like, oh my God, already stressed out,
and you go to meetings and you maybe didn't touch on, your food yet, your breakfast, or you go to the gym in a fasted state, you're adding stress to the body. So the body says, well, stress, I need energy, I need glucose.
Yeah.
Well, if that is not circulating, happily, then the cortisol, the body's going to go to your muscles and kind of break down that to get the glucose from the muscle. And then once there is that circulating glucose, you're like, yay, I got it. Well, what happens then next? Well, our brain senses that and says, well, there is glucose in the system. We need now to bring that down, into the cells. So now it activates the pancreas to release insulin, which is also a must-have hormone in our body. And before we know, we have, higher levels of insulin circulating. So imagine now if you have this constant stress in your body, physical, emotional, mental, perceived, whatever, right? Well, that system continues, that process continues. And then you might end up with higher levels of glucose and higher levels of insulin in the body, which ultimately can create a little metabolic chaos and leads to potentially insulin resistance. And then consider other imbalances around can lead to prediabetes, diabetes, and so on. And then, my friend, we are in tough territories when we start getting pre-diabetic and insulin resistant. So that's one angle that we can see the cortisol relationship to metabolic health. And then you say, what's the problem with having this insulin around besides the diabetes? Well, now the cells cannot get those that glucose inside to generate the ATP and energy. Well, you start having fatigue, and too much insulin, what it does, well, it creates belly fat. It stores fat. It's an important hormone, but when it's too much, it stores fat. So now we're saying, well, now does that impact every cell? It does impact every cell. So now it's not only your brain that start getting foggy, it's not your fatigue, just you kind of lame, falling asleep, right? But now your organs also start performing at a lower level. So imagine this going on and on and on and on for a while. That's where we see a lot of clients that come to me and probably come to you, right, Courtney, with these symptoms, in addition to gut health and other hormone healths and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And gosh, there's so much you just said there, just to kind of like circle back to something you were talking about, Maria, because I just want to point this out. I think this is so important for people to really understand. Like, humans are really the only mammal, I would go so far as to say like living animal, right, that has the ability to perceive stress the way we do, and then not be able to appropriately discharge stressful events. Meaning that if you look at animals in nature, whether it's like bears or wolves or whatever, when these animals are in stressful situations, deer are a perfect one. Like, I live in the state of Wisconsin, plenty of deer around, people hunt them, right? Like, they can actually go into like a shake response after they've been threatened or they feel there's some sort of stressor, right? And it's a natural thing that the nervous system is enabled to do. And we actually have that capacity too. But because we have such complex, intelligent brains, we're able to override that with our forebrains, right? And so it's through that complexity of the brain and the way that we engage with the outward world, and then all of the social context of like, it's not appropriate to just break down crying at the grocery store if you get stressed. It's not appropriate to just start shaking, at your work desk if you read a stressful email, right? Like, we find these adaptive mechanisms to basically internalize these stress patterns. And then there aren't ways to give outlet to this built up stress, or in that moment, tune into that and find simple ways through breath work or whatever it is you're going to choose to bring that nervous system down and regulate things. That's kind of what you're talking to, Maria, right? Like this like build up over time, and then it becomes this new set pattern, and then people will actually perceive this as normal. Like, they've completely lost the capacity to even tell when they're stressed and not stressed, right?
Yes, and and we're going to jump into the gut health here because folks show up with many symptoms of imbalances in their digestive system.
Yes.
Right. But I want to say this before we jump into that, which is, it's all related to part of solutions on this, right? So when we're working with those high achieving folks, I mean, that they want to go, right? They want to do things and they want to continue to do those things for the rest of their lives. whether at work or pursue some other passions, or the families, go places, travel, whatever. And you kind of think about, you talk to them about this stuff about slowing down. They're like, no, no. So, like, how do you want me to slow down? How do you want me to I said, hold on a second. It's going back to the root, as how we started the conversation,
Right.
which is, what do you want the most with your life, and why is that so important to you? So oftentimes that stress that we're going through, and that bubble becoming a bubble of stress that we don't even understand that we're in, but we know something is off, that it's too many balls to juggle, is almost calling timeouts. That's the simple things, right? And these timeouts, then there is several strategies that we share with our clients that they can do, even during the workday, and then in the morning, in the evening. Because why is this important? It's going to be important because you're really taking the small steps that are bringing the nervous system to calm down a little bit instead of go, go, go. So this couple minutes of interactions and stops can be a great leverage for anyone to get to better performance and focus, and get those pounds shed, and get gut, better in health as well. So I just want to say that, because it's important. People think that's not possible. It is possible when we want something badly enough. We just have to go back to the why that we're doing this, and how those things are impacting us today and also in the future. Right?
Yeah.
So talk to us here, Courtney, a little bit more about how does this stress, then we talk about metabolic health, a small piece, but important. How does that impact our gut?
Yeah, great question. So chronic stress, first thing, similar to what you were describing about breaking down muscle tissue, right? In chronically elevated cortisol state. So that breakdown process, that's systemic, right? So in the gut, what that's going to look like is basically a breakdown of what's called the mucosal barrier. And I like to think of the mucosal barrier as like the garden that tends to the good, healthy bacteria that live in the gut, right? And Maria and I were kind of talking about different analogies to conceptualize this the other day. She likes the neighborhood analogy. I like that one too, but I also like the garden analogy. So, if you're a gardener, this will resonate, but it'd be very, very difficult to plant seeds in really poor quality garden soil, right? Like, you're not going to get those plants to grow very well. Certainly, it's going to be hard for them to thrive. Your gut is like that too. The bacteria have to be able to embed in what's called the mucosal barrier. And if it's eroded, if it's broken down in any way, shape, or form, we usually will start to see depletion of the good bacterial species, which then opens up the entire environment for the bad guys to take a stronghold and proliferate, kind of like weeds in a garden, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, another thing too that I commonly see, we're going to talk about the testing in just a minute. One of the tests Maria and I both run on clients is a functional stool test called the GI map. There's a very specific keystone strain on there called Akkermansia, and it's a mucin-loving strain. I would argue it's probably one of the most important bacterial strains in the body to support the health of that mucosal barrier. And I can't tell you how many times I've looked at a GI map on various people and it's completely missing, right? And this is the kicker. This is probably one of the key similarities I've seen between people with metabolic issues, right? Like the cancer people you work with, Maria, as well as people struggling with IBS, because when it goes missing, it can usually present as metabolic dysregulation secondary to that, trouble actually like maintaining good blood sugar levels and, that adipose gain on the body, all that stuff, right? But then in the people prone to GI disorders, we see this show up with the GI symptomality, like the bloating, the cramping, the loose stool, the diarrhea, the constipation. So that's all very, very good information we can get from the testing we run that kind of confirms like, okay, this looks like a big piece of the puzzle. And then of course we want to look at what is really going on with stress hormone, right? So that's one thing I wanted to mention. And then just one little thing I wanted to add on that does kind of go back to the metabolic health is, if we look at the types of bacteria that are showing up on stool testing or just in the gut, right? And we're seeing a lot of the species that produce a toxin called endotoxin, or lipopolysaccharide is another name for it. Studies have shown that in the presence of leaky gut, which is really just a fancy way of saying there's little holes in that mucosal barrier, that gut lining, that's letting these bacterial toxins out, letting food particles out, letting all this stuff leak out of the gut. This endotoxin will go systemic, And that is shown to highly correlate with type 2 diabetes, metabolic syndrome, the whole 9 yards. And in the people prone to those disorders, makes it that much harder then for the body to actually regulate metabolism properly, for insulin to get glucose into the cells. So there is this very real connection between what's going on in the gut, especially in terms of that bacterial balance and composition, and how your body can handle sugar regulation, right? Like at the systemic blood sugar level. So yeah, I wanted to mention that, Maria, because I think sometimes people don't even realize that there is a connection there.
Yeah, that commensal bacteria is so important. And there is even more species that we see on that GI map, right? That are so critical. So, and we cannot actually talk about the gut in the GI map in metabolic health without mentioning a little bit at least of the GLP drugs out there, right? So yes, there are plenty of drugs, and the market is flooded with people using GLP-1s to lose weight. And I'm not going to go against it over here. Now, are people also aware that our gut produces bacteria and has and hosts bacteria, okay, that is going to actually spike those GLP-1s? Yes, and we can see that in the GI map. So sometimes you see, okay, if a person shows up overweight, fatigue with the metabolic health and gut issues, whether it's constipation, bloating, reflux or something, well, Courtney and I'm pretty sure they're going to be thinking about, well, and then we look at the diet, right? Which is, okay, the person has been a usual traditional, I want to call SAD diet, which is the standard American diet, which is kind of sad, which is sad that they're in a SAD diet. Right? But hey, I was there. I don't know about you, but I was there for many years.
Oh, most of us. Many years. Yeah, most of us were products of that era. Growing up in the 80s and 90s, that was totally my household for sure.
Yeah. So we're no saints here, folks. Now, I don't do that anymore for many, many years, right? I had my epiphany over here. So when we look into the, just the profile of that person, we start seeing, okay, we might see this, see that, and that, and that, and that, just from a stool test perspective, microbiome. And we can also start putting the picture of every other labs that we run, okay? Is that simple when we have that experience of seeing people in labs and symptoms and how things improve and how they get to the point. And then we say, well, how about we help our microbiome, right? To actually get those GLP-1s to work. And acromancy is a big one. It's a big one. But then sometimes people show up with literally non-detectable, species like that. Exactly. Well, people going into supplementation and all that. Well, sometimes we have to do the groundwork. That supplementation, when it's so low, is not it. We need really is to change what? What we have to change? Our diet, our lifestyle, right?
You have to ask the question, why did Akkermansia go missing, right? Because, and people watching might not realize you can actually supplement with that strain of bacteria like that. There are products now on the market for it, and there is a time and place. But the way that Maria and I are trained, we're not Band-Aid practitioners. We don't like to just look at testing and it's like, treat the paper, right? Like there's a saying in the functional health space, like, okay, well, we can see you have all of these imbalances and all of these deficiencies. We'll just give you all of these things to bring you up to par, right? But okay, we might be correcting it functionally speaking in terms of the actual range we're looking for or what we're trying to do and what we're seeing on the test. But we're not going deeper and actually looking at what caused this strain to disappear in the first place. And to really fix it, probably you share this opinion as well, Maria, we have to go to that extra step of what caused your gut to lose Akkermansia in the first place? And that's the place to fix it from. So, and I just want to mention too, because you're talking about the GLP-1 drugs, I'll just give a brand name so people are totally aware of what we're talking about, Ozempic, right? Yeah. So one of the functions of those drugs is to actually slow down gastric emptying, right? Now, how many times in both of our populations are we dealing with people that already have too low stomach acid production, very low stomach acid environments, which is not a good thing, by the way, right? We need stomach acid to break our protein down, to break our food down in general. Now we're adding this medication that's actually making that problem almost worse. That is 100% going to set the stage for all kinds of GI symptomology, right?
Yes, and I want to say that we are not here to say don't do it.
Right.
but let's
Be
address
aware.
the problem.
Be aware.
You know, be aware that there is more that you can do. So the medication can be sometimes a way, a path to give you inspiration that you can lose weight, that you can be yourself again. But also know that the studies are showing you leave the medication without doing any work in the body, what's going to happen? You're going to gain the weight back. So we work together with that. If we get a patient, a patient or a client, right, that is using it. Okay, let's work on the foundation of your body. Let's work on this lifestyle. Let's do this functional lab testing to get insights into your gut, your hormones, your metabolism, and so on, your liver health, and yada, yada. So then we can say, okay, now we're going to work into a better nutrition profile for you. Yeah. We're going to work into your exercise and your stress, part of it, stress reduction or management, I want to say. Work into your sleep, because all this impacts our ability to not only manage stress, but also to get our metabolic health in order again, and to get our health in order again, and to get our hormones and so much more. So yes, it is important that we do the work with whatever medication, it's being, I guess, prescribed to get you to the next level.
Right. Not that we're saying that it's our prerogative or our scope to recommend people go off of these things, but what I do feel pretty strongly about is people are empowered with knowledge, right? Yeah. And so I think we live in a world where a lot of drugs are prescribed every day, and people aren't always aware when they're given these prescriptions what the side effects potentially might be, right? And the hard part about trying to get the body back in balance from a more natural, holistic standpoint is sometimes, as we're looking at what we're seeing on this functional testing, we can see how certain of these medications could be making barriers to actually using some of the holistic supports we would be able to use otherwise. And so then we have to have a very open conversation about, this is what's going on from what I can see, and you're also taking this medication, which is going to make the problem worse. I could give you this, but I really can't, because it's not going to work with these factors in place, right? So that can be a bit of a tricky thing to navigate. But point being, I just think it's all about people kind of understanding that the body doesn't just go out of balance for no reason. And there's so much we can do from a what do I want to say, a nutritional, holistic perspective to restore proper function before having to go to more aggressive means. And I would, more serious means, if you will, I would consider kind of meds in that camp, right? Yeah. Because a lot of times they're altering, biochemistry in the body. Some of them can be extremely difficult to get off of if people choose to down the road, right? Yes. And so that's just something to be aware of. And, if you're at the early stages of dealing with any of these issues we're talking about, just know that you've got a lot of choices on the table. And it's not that you have to just jump straight to, a medication that might alter things in a way that could be hard for you down the road then if you want to try to get off of that, right?
Yeah. Yes. Love it. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. We're here in a prevention mode as much as we can. Right. And then if we cross the beyond prevention, right? Yeah. It's how can we bring more homeostasis from a natural way that you can sustain this for the rest of your life? Because Courtney and I agree, neither one of us, want to age and be in our 60s, 70s, and 80s, or whatever age it is, with a pile of medication, right? With piles of doctor office, inability to do the things that we love, to walk, to exercise, to go places, to talk to people, to have brain, to continue to do things. So we are pro that life. Right. And we are also pro taking the approach of doing as much as we can on our own, right? And that is what is so available to us these days, especially when you work with a practitioner is skilled and certified to give you, to give you this kind of toys, I call toys, but tools. Toys. What? Are you getting me, Maria?
Could be toys too, Maria, right?
Yes, it could be toys too. It could be exercise toys. I call them toys.
Stress relief toys. I mean, hey, yeah, that works, right?
Relief stress toys.
Oh gosh. Well, do you want to touch a little bit on the Dutch test? Because we've kind of
Oh
alluded to
yeah,
the GI map. And I know that like we both run this, but I think it would be helpful for you because obviously you come from the world of metabolism and that really
yeah.
strongly ties into hormones and stress hormones, right? So maybe talk a little bit about the Dutch and how that can help people understand what's really going on with their stress response.
Yeah, so the Dutch test, you know, there's a few versions of this test, but it's an incredibly helpful for us to understand our hormones such as cortisol
Mhm.
and also our steroid hormones, you know, sex hormones from estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, and metabolites. So from a perspective of stress that we're talking about, let me point this one out, which is, you know, you go to a doctor, sometimes, depending on where you are with your life, the physician may recommend to do a test your cortisol. Most of them are not. But then you ask the question, I mean, is testing cortisol AM or whatever number, AM being you're going to the doctor at 12, you know, well, that's not valid anymore.
Right.
But is testing the blood version of cortisol valid? Is that giving enough information for us? I
Mhm.
would say no. It's
Mhm.
not giving enough information.
Mhm.
So when you work with a test like Dutch, it provides, you know, metabolites. There is total production of cortisol, right? And there is what is free in the body.
Mhm.
So we are able to see really, okay, what is circulating and what is the body is producing. And then we have an idea that says, hold on a second, I might have a ton of these hormones that are circulating and, you know, not stored much, not being produced, or vice versa. So that's going to give some different impacts in the body. Like person's going to have fatigue and certain other symptoms. But what is important to know is that the body has always a mechanism, you know, of protection,
Yeah.
you know. And from a Dutch test, for example, we know what the body's producing, those adrenal glands that we talked earlier in the
Mhm.
call, right? To what is free available to utilize.
Mhm.
And then sometimes we're not producing enough and we have a ton that is
Available.
actually free. And you're like, wow, how is that possible? Well, it's stuck. Literally, that cortisol is sticks in the body. And then you're wondering why you might not be losing weight. Well, remember that the cortisol is going to do what to blood sugar and insulin? It's going to elevate that. And that can be create an inability for you to lose weight, right?
Mhm.
And then the other way around, when you have a lot produced, but then it's clearing too fast from the body,
Right.
and then you don't see a ton free. Well, then you're going to have some levels of fatigue, lame, and several other things. But then all these things impact every single cell in the body.
Yeah.
So from a Dutch perspective, we can see those, and then we can actually, you know, again, evaluate the person's lifestyle,
Mhm.
what's going on in their lives, their routines, what they're eating, and all the stuff that we've been talking about, and then help them cope with that. And sometimes what we need to do is to actually just help the adrenal glands to keep producing. And we kind of help the body to go from storage, you know, so it's being produced to actually being free to be used,
Yeah.
right?
Exactly.
And vice versa. So it's kind of a complex, but we have this data visible to us, you know,
Yeah.
in which a lot of people have no idea. So when somebody does the measurement of blood only, it doesn't give us all the information. The same thing with sex hormones. There is a lot of information that is not provided in a blood and will never be. So, you know, I like to think this way about functional lab testing. You know, think about the body. You know, we're always used to getting the blood work done, which is fantastic. It's amazing information, and I think that everybody should be doing. Okay, everybody should have their blood work done and evaluated from a functional level perspective. Very different than the normal. But going back to what the blood does, well, the blood provides certain data about the body. But then we have the extremes. Think about it. The hair provides data. Okay,
Mhm.
the saliva provides data.
Mhm.
The urine provides data, right?
Mhm.
And the stool, all the things that come out of the body have data. So in functional, you know, or medicine, you know, which we are kind of in that role, right?
Mhm.
We're no doctors, but is a functional medicine kind of protocol that we look into the body as a
Right.
whole. That's where we're looking. And sometimes there is some specific tests like the GI map and the Dutch, that are kind of, for me, they're foundational.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Right? And then from there, then we start working on potentially other tests, you know. But yes, it gives so much information about that. And another thing that I want to say, in addition to that, that we might discuss it another next time. But from this Dutch, which I love when it comes to metabolic health, okay, not only the cortisol is going to, the cortisol levels, you know, whether it's too high or too low, is going to also impact our sex hormones.
Mm-hmm.
And what I see a lot is what is called estrogen dominance. Mm-hmm. When there is too much estrogen in the body. And that dysregulation starts also from this metabolic health that we've been talking about. Mm-hmm. But also the origin is what? What is causing this? Then we go back to our diet and lifestyle, right? Exactly. It doesn't show up from like the sky or a light or light bulb or anything like that. No, it shows up with our decisions, our choices. And there's no judgment here. Like, we don't know everything. We don't know what we don't know, right? And that's why we're doing this live, to kind of make people aware of things. But the estrogen dominance on men and women, by the way, I work with men that are overweight and obese who have significant estrogen dominance, right? It's going to be almost impossible for you to lose weight. It's going to be almost impossible for you to lose weight. And those are kind of things we see how also the hormones are potentially converting into even more estrogen. So people are into drugs these days or hormone therapy without actually not doing those kind of information. They're just put into hormones, and well, this testosterone could be converting into estrogen, and that estrogen dominance keeps piling up and then becomes more difficult to lose weight. So the functional lab testing get us so much more information that then we can act upon, right? And so that's what I think that is indispensable for us to take a look at that.
Yeah, absolutely, Maria. And just to clarify this, if anyone's watching and thinking, like, what does she mean that testosterone becomes estrogen? So that's all the same hormone pathway actually in the body. Both of those hormones are made from a mother hormone called DHEA. And what's very popular, as you were mentioning, Maria, is like these testosterone replacement therapy clinics where men can literally walk in there and just get these shots. And if they haven't done this baseline testing to see how their body's metabolizing these hormones, they could be basically shooting themselves in the foot, getting this testosterone. It's on that same pathway as estrogen. If that testosterone is getting over aromatized, that's the word we use, into a lot of estrogen and actually continuing to stay relatively low in terms of the leftover testosterone in the body, now we're just making this huge estrogen testosterone imbalance even worse. And so, yeah, this is just such good information that we get on the Dutch test. And the other thing I love about it that I wanted to mention as well is there's the ability to look at stress hormones, cortisol specifically, over 4 points of the day on like just the basic Dutch Complete, which is so much better than a one-time blood draw. Like typically if you go in for the doctor, they'll recommend you come earlier in the morning when, you know, as close I think as they're trying to get to cortisol's natural peak. Yep. Mm-hmm. You can get that read, but then you have no idea what's going on with cortisol the rest of the day, versus when you do a Dutch Complete, which is a test that we would run all the time, we can actually see, are we seeing an optimal pattern, you know, that would also explain why somebody might have energy levels that are okay one part of the day, but tanking the other part of the day, right? Like that's just huge for us to kind of see how all of this is coming out. So
yeah. Thanks. I totally skipped that part. But sometimes, you know, we look at these things and it's like so normal to us, and you say, yes, you're listening. It's like, yeah, it is critical. And actually, I'm going to share an example from this morning. Actually, I had a session with a client and she's in her 60s. Okay. And this chick, call her chick, you know, she is into CrossFit. I'm a CrossFitter. Okay. I'm 50 years old. She's in the 60s and she loves it. Right now. Now, in her 60s, there is certain things going on, you know, with her. And then she works out hard, and she actually got sick and, you know, went to her CrossFit gym and lifted very heavy. And then the other day, yesterday, a workout was high intensity, which is normal to lift heavy at CrossFit, and you lift heavy and you do high intensity. And she pushed hard and she's feeling like crap, right? Now, this should make sense to somebody, right? That when you're sick, you might take it easy.
again, she's a high achiever. That's a communication thing that sometimes we coaches have to come in and say, hey, we got to listen to the body. But then people like her, they also like the data. So I went back to her hormone levels, right? Which explores 4 times a day. She starts the day with cortisol already to the roof and goes even higher and stays high all day. And I look at her, you know, and I said, let's correlate here what's going on with your levels. And she's got some insulin issues, okay, some glucose issues. She's fairly in shape, but she's complaining, says, you know, Maria, in my 50s, I was fit, you know, in this CrossFit gym. She's like, I got muscles, I was there well defined. And I say, yeah, I know it. And she's like, but now I'm still strong, but I see the belly fat. And then I said, dang, there you go. Yeah. Remember a few minutes ago, we're talking about the consequences of high levels of cortisol and belly fat, right? And then, so here I go to educate her, and she's like, I get it. So then we start talking about, you know, a few small things that she can do to minimize that. I don't need her to get out of her CrossFit, because I've been there myself. You know, I've been there, was in adrenal fatigue. Basically, you're like tanked. Okay, versus high cortisol levels, I was tanked. I continued to exercise, you know, but I adapted, right? And then I also changed my diet. I changed my sleep. So all those things to help the body to manage this. And then you start supplementing to help boost the energy levels again. But this is so common. It is so common. And now talking about how those high levels impact, again, go back to the gut. She's like, well, I'm not going to the bathroom, you know, the same way. Sometimes she's got loose stools and all this kind of stuff, right? It's, we have to respect the body. First, we need to understand that those things are correlated. Second, we can say, well, do I need to find out who am I? How is that impacting me, right? In my body. And that's where you get data. And then you can establish a plan that works best for you, that will address these root causes, right?
Exactly. Yeah, no, that's such a great example, and definitely common. And I mean, I've certainly seen it in my practice, and it's tough, Maria, because I feel like sometimes in the early stages of that amount of cortisol output and dysregulation, although people that way don't want to do this, like the best thing they can do is probably take the energy or the exercise intensity down some, so they're not jacking their cortisol up, and that would actually help them lose the weight. It seems very counterintuitive to the person who's like trained calories in, calories out, you know, exercise more hard, burn more calories, right? But this is the way the body works. It's not always this like linear process of like work output equals more weight loss, right? Like this is why looking at the whole picture with the hormones is so important for that. So awesome. I love it. Well, should we preview our part 2 before we sign off for today?
I know. We can talk here for hours and hours, but people are going to say, oh my God, move on, ladies. You know, but we were passionate about this, you know.
My gosh, like, what are we talking about next time? We're talking about metabolic flexibility in May. We're coming back in May. I think it's May 15th is what we decided on at 5 p.m. Eastern to have that conversation. So what we mean by metabolic flexibility is that basically it's super, super important to have a metabolism that can run equally on stored fat as it can on glucose, right, or sugar, and how that's such a problem in the people that we tend to work with, whether they realize it or not, right? Like it's a driving inflammatory factor imbalance that they're struggling with that can obviously have impact on their metabolic health and ability to lose weight, but it can also just put a strain on the body in general and make it hard. Even in my world, people aren't absorbing their food well. That can lead to metabolic flexibility problems as well. So, yeah.
Yes. And again, we have tests to help us that. You know, we talked today about the GI map, which we can see how people are breaking down their foods. There is so much in that test, you know, that is so valuable. And I think Courtney and I, we agree on that. If we could, we would give, you know, a GI map to every single person in this world. If we could afford that, we would, because it's so foundational. You know, the health really starts in the gut, and is understanding how it does. So metabolic health, gut, hormones, and all that, they're all correlated. And yes, metabolic flexibility is something that we're seeing actually
becoming less and less, right? There is extremes, and these extremes is leading us to be less flexible.
Right.
And that to us is not how we live life.
Exactly.
We have to think about, when you go on vacation, when you have scenarios at the home or work, how am I going to handle my diet, especially speaking,
Right.
and my habits that is going to keep me metabolically flexible. So I empower my body. I do the things that is going to allow it to say, hey, let's shift from burning carbs, to burning fat, and vice versa. That's a healthy, metabolism.
Yeah.
And I think that there is actually, it's getting, in extremes.
Yeah.
Either people are running too much on the carbs or too much on the fats and the proteins.
Yeah.
Right.
I agree. So we'll definitely touch on some of the fad diets and how those impact metabolic flexibility. Another thing I do want to talk to you about next month as well, Maria, is the role of intermittent fasting.
Oh, yeah.
Good, bad. Should people do it? Should they not? Right? Like, we have a lot of similar thoughts on that. We'll leave that as a cliffhanger because that also impacts into this exact topic as well. So I think it'll be a really good conversation. There'll be a lot of really good nuggets people will come away with just to think about, especially if you are a person who's on a fad diet to feel like you have to keep your weight maintained at a certain level, or you have to space your meals a certain way to keep your weight. Like, typically people do this for weight loss reasons. That's not the only reason, but we're definitely going to talk to all of that and kind of clear up some myths, hopefully, when we broach this topic next month.
Yes. Well, I hope you guys, show up and on the 15th. And we're going to do the 5 Eastern and 4 Central, right?
Correct. Yeah. And there's always going to be a replay uploaded too. But yeah,
yes.
You can make it live and you've got questions. We're here to answer. There weren't a lot of questions today, but that's totally fine. Like, next time we do this, like, bring them on and we'll do our best to answer the questions too.
And you're welcome also to follow us if you're not already following us. And also send us, either drop a note over here saying, hey, questions about it. We'll be glad to send you, to communicate with you about that. If you want to meet with Courtney and I individually, hey, we're here to support you. And also, if you have questions for next time and you're not going to be able to attend, drop us a line, either DM us or comment on this video, and then we'll make sure that we answer those questions when we're in that session too.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's perfect, Maria. Awesome. This is so great. So fun doing this with you today.
I know. It was fun.
Okay.
You have a good day. Thank you.
You too.
Bye.
Bye-bye.